In today's Los Angeles, a city now marked by both its glitz and the painful aftermath of tragedy, a last night of love would unfold against a backdrop of wildfires, economic uncertainty, and the ever-present pressure of modern life. It would be a story not just of love, but of survival, forgiveness, and the recognition of what truly matters when time is running out. The sky was an eerie orange, the smoke from the raging fires creeping closer, and the city of Los Angeles seemed to hold its breath. Mia stood on the balcony of her apartment, watching as the flames licked the edges of the skyline. Tonight, it felt like the world was coming to an end, but for her, this night was more than just another disaster. It was the last chance to make things right. For years, she had lived in LA, chasing fame, success, and a life she thought would complete her. But somewhere along the way, she lost sight of what really mattered. Jake, her boyfriend, the man who had always been there for her. Tonight, as the fires threatened to tear through the city, Mia realized she might lose him forever. Not just to the flames, but to the distance that had grown between them over the years. Jake, a firefighter, had been battling these wildfires all night. His calls had grown sparse, and Mia's anxiety was rising with every passing minute. She knew that if the fire didn't get to them, their relationship might. She needed to tell him how much she loved him, how much she wished she had been there when he needed her the most. With the fire creeping closer and evacuation orders in place, Mia is left with one last night to confront the truth about their love. As she waits, memories of their time together flood her mind, good and bad. But when Jake finally calls, his voice is strained and weak. "Mia, there might not be much time. Will they have enough time to heal the wounds between them, or is it too late?" Mia's hands trembled as she held the phone to her ear. The silence between them stretched on, broken only by the crackling sound of the fire in the distance. Her mind raced. "Jake," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible over the growing chaos outside. There was a long pause, and when he spoke again, it was as if every word carried a weight she wasn't prepared for. "Mia, the fire, it's moving faster than we thought. I don't know if I can make it back. I don't even know if I'll have a home to come back to." She closed her eyes, fighting back the tears. She had spent so many years chasing dreams that felt so empty now, compared to the love she had taken for granted. The city that once promised so much seemed to be crumbling, just like her relationship with Jake. In the silence of that moment, Mia realized how much she had neglected the one person who had always been there for her. "I'm scared, Jake," she said softly. "I'm scared that if this fire doesn't take everything from us, then we will." The sound of his breathing was heavy on the other end. "I'm coming for you, Mia. I swear. Just hold on." But Mia wasn't sure if holding on was enough. The streets were empty, the evacuation sirens blaring in the distance, and the fire was closing in. She could see the glow now, an angry red stain on the horizon. She stepped away from the balcony, looking at the photo of them on the wall, laughing, happy, unaware of how much time they had wasted. As the flames roared louder, Mia knew that the clock was ticking, and the only thing left was their final moments together. Would Jake make it in time, or would this be their last night? Mia paced the small living room, the weight of the night pressing down on her chest. The fire was getting closer. She could hear the distant crackle of flames, feel the heat through the walls. Her heart raced, but it wasn't just from the fear of the fire. It was the realization that she might lose Jake forever. The last few years had been a blur of missed calls, forgotten anniversaries, and growing distance between them. She had always assumed there would be time to fix things, that they'd always have another chance. Now time was slipping away, faster than the fire itself. She picked up the letter she had started writing to Jake earlier, her attempt to express everything she had held back for so long. But the words didn't come easily. How could she say what she had left unsaid all these years? How could she make up for the neglect, the selfishness, and the mistakes? Her mind kept racing back to their first days together, the way he had looked at her like she was everything, the way they used to dream together. Where had that love gone? The phone buzzed again, and for a second, Mia froze. She picked it up, expecting to hear Jake's voice again, but it was a text from her friend, Olivia. "Is Jake okay? I heard the fire is getting close." Mia's fingers hovered over the screen, unsure of what to reply. She didn't want to give Olivia false hope. The truth was, she didn't know if Jake was okay. She didn't know if any of them were. Outside, the sirens grew louder, and Mia's thoughts went dark. What if this was it? What if this night was all they had left? Would Jake make it back in time to fight for them? Or would the fire consume them both, emotionally and physically? The uncertainty gnawed at her. All she could do was wait, praying that somehow he would find his way back to her before it was too late. Mia stared out the window, the fiery glow now reflecting off the sky, casting an unsettling light over the city. The wind had picked up, howling through the streets, carrying with it the smell of burning wood and destruction. She could hear the crackling flames growing louder, the sound so close it felt as though the fire itself was breathing down her neck. Her phone buzzed again, and for a moment, she thought it might be Jake. But when she checked, it was just another evacuation alert. The city was shutting down, emptying out, but she couldn't move. She couldn't leave without knowing if he was safe. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions. She had no control over the fire, no control over the city that seemed to be crumbling around her. But the one thing she could control was what she felt. And right now she felt helpless. Her love for Jake had never been more real than in this moment. But it was too late to fix everything. She couldn't change the past, couldn't undo the moments of neglect. All she could do now was wait and pray that he would come back to her. Outside, the distant wail of a siren reminded her of the clock ticking down. Every second felt like a lifetime. She pulled her jacket tighter around herself and took one last look at their apartment. Would they make it through this? Would she get the chance to tell him everything? Her phone rang again, and her heart skipped a beat. This time it was him. "Jake?" Her voice broke as she answered. But what he said next stopped her cold. "Mia!" Jake's voice was barely a whisper, strained and heavy, as if he were speaking from a world far away. The crackling of the fire echoed in the background, muffling his words. I'm not sure I can make it. There's something wrong, Mia. I'm stuck." Her heart slammed in her chest. Stuck? What did that mean? She felt the panic rising in her throat as she pressed the phone tighter to her ear. "Jake, where are you? What's happening? Please talk to me." He breathed heavily, and for a long moment, there was nothing but the noise of the fire, so loud now that it felt like it was inside the apartment with her. I can't get out. I'm trapped in the fire line. There's no way around it. The roads are blocked. The exits, they're all cut off. I'm not going to make it out in time." Mia's legs buckled beneath her, and she sank to the floor, the weight of his words crushing her. This wasn't the reunion she'd imagined. This wasn't the ending she had hoped for. "Jake, please, you have to fight. You can't just give up," she begged, her voice breaking. "Please don't leave me. Don't let this fire take everything from us." But the line went dead. The phone slipped from her trembling fingers as the world seemed to close in around her. Outside, the sirens grew louder, a constant reminder that time was running out. The fire was getting closer, and she was alone. As the last of the sunlight dipped beneath the horizon, a terrifying realization hit Mia. She might lose Jake tonight, not just to the fire, but to the distance between them that could never be crossed again. Mia's mind was reeling, her breath shallow as she stared at the screen of her phone, the call having ended so suddenly. The silence in the room felt suffocating, the only sound the roar of the fire inching ever closer. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. But she knew one thing. She couldn't give up on Jake. Not like this. With shaky hands, she grabbed her keys and ran out of the apartment, ignoring the evacuation orders. The streets were eerily empty, save for the distant sounds of chaos. She didn't know where to go, but she couldn't sit still. She had to find him. She had to make sure he didn't die alone, trapped in the flames with no one to fight for him. As she drove through the streets, the sky above was a glowing inferno, and the air felt thick with smoke. The tension in her chest grew with every passing second, the distance between her and Jake feeling like an eternity. Then through the haze, she saw the flicker of emergency lights up ahead. Her heart raced as she swerved toward the source, but as she got closer, she froze. The fire was everywhere, cutting off all paths, and in the center of the chaos stood Jake, alive, but not alone. He was surrounded by other firefighters, pulling people out of the wreckage, leading them to safety. He wasn't trapped. He had made it out, But as Mia got closer, she realized something that stopped her cold. Jake's face was filled with guilt and regret, his eyes locked with hers. "I couldn't make it in time for us, Mia," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of their unspoken words. "I was too late to save our love." And as the fire raged on behind them, Mia realized that sometimes the hardest fires to survive are the ones inside. Mia stood there staring at Jake, feeling a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The fire that had ravaged the city was still a roaring beast in the distance, but somehow it seemed less threatening now. In the midst of destruction, they had both found themselves, but not in the way she had hoped. The man she had been fighting to save wasn't lost to the flames, but to the time they had wasted. Jake stepped toward her, his face drawn with exhaustion and regret. "I'm sorry, Mia. I should have been here. I should have fought harder for us. But I wasn't enough." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a moment, she just stood there, unsure of what to say. All the hurt, the fear, the lost years, they weighed heavily on her. But she realized something in that moment. Sometimes love isn't about saving the other person. It's about saving yourself and finding peace within. "We both failed, Jake," she said softly, her voice cracking. "We let it go too far. But we're here now. That's what matters." He nodded, his eyes filled with an unspoken understanding. There would be no easy answers, no magic fix for the wreckage of their past. But in the heat of the moment, Mia realized they weren't fighting the fire anymore. They were fighting for themselves, for their own redemption. As the sun began to rise over the smoldering city, the fire was finally starting to die down. The streets, once filled with fear and chaos, now held a strange kind of peace. For the first time in a long time, Mia felt a glimmer of hope. She wasn't sure what the future held, or whether they could rebuild what had been broken. But she knew one thing for certain: there was no turning back. The fire had taught them both the hardest lesson of all. Love isn't about waiting for the perfect moment. It's about making the most of the moments you have left. And this time, she wasn't going to waste a single one.